Good afternoon. My name is Tony Bevilacqua. I'm the founder and CEO of Cognitive 3D. We are a Vancouver-based spatial analytics company focused on virtual, augmented, and mixed reality experiences. We help our customers understand and quantify human performance data as it relates to their virtual reality training experiences. And today we're going to be talking about deploying enterprise VR training at scale. Adoption of VR training is at an absolute inflection point. COVID-19 has been an accelerator for a lot of organizations looking to be able to deploy VR training in a scaled way, and modern enterprises are taking this into their learning ecosystems to provide their employees a serious advantage over others. This technology offers the opportunity to reskill and upskill faster. It gives them the ability to adapt to new challenges and the superpowers they need to retain information and exercise knowledge within 3D simulated environments. To remain competitive, enterprises should be adopting VR training solutions and taking advantage of some of these capabilities. And that's what we're seeing. And we're going to talk a little bit about scalability today. One of the biggest traps that we see in deploying VR training is really around proof of concepts. These often begin in kind of a skunkworks or innovation team behind closed doors and don't have feedback from the rest of the organization. We think that this is a critical mistake because it affects the future scalability of a particular project. It omits the ability for your opportunity to build awareness within the organization, as well as construct and establish new relationships with champions early on, especially within departments that you're going to need their support when it comes to scale. Don't stay confined on an island, and look at building buy-in within your organization at the very early stages of your project. Some of those organizations include parties like IT. IT needs to be informed from the very beginning on what you're doing and what you're building. They protect the security of your organization. They deploy and manage and scale systems within your organization, and they can provide you the tools and capabilities that you need to help scale your initiative within the organization as well. Providing visibility to IT is an absolute superpower for your project, in that you'll be able to provide visibility within the department on what you're doing, and provide stakeholders within the department as well. If you start building a champion very early on within IT, there's visibility, and this doesn't become something that they need to stop, put the brakes on, and understand. It becomes something that they have visibility on, that they can provide advice and guidance on. And ideally, you'll have a stakeholder within that organization that champions your project in its deployment. The next area is really around learning and development. And this one is a little bit surprising in that sometimes learning and development is not involved in these pilots and POCs. This organization is responsible for designing educational curriculum for your organization and aligning those learning outcomes with your business objectives. They are often the stakeholder that owns the LMS. They're often the stakeholder that owns the training role within your organization. Sometimes they live within human resources, and sometimes they stand alone within the organization as well. But I think that they're a critical stakeholder that should be involved early on around the types of testing that you're doing, the types of POCs and pilots that you're putting together. And they can often champion these technologies and design, things that are going to work really well for the business. Another area that we've seen some of our customers stumble on is really around unions. You need to work with your labor and who your labor is represented by. You need to make sure that you think about how this training is going to be used, what data is going to be collected, and what implications there might be kind of across the organization. So don't ignore this category, and make sure that you think about it and how it might apply when you have organized labor within your organization. The next piece is really around the low-hanging fruit. We often see, scenarios that address kind of a major problem, right? And when I say major, I mean impacts a lot of users kind of across the organization. And it might be the biggest, overall exposure that your project might have, but it might not actually be the low-hanging fruit that's going to produce the most amount of value. And this kind of goes back to the stakeholders. What types of activities can be made more emotionally engaging? What are activities that are inconvenient to learn, right? What takes up critical resources? What wastes supplies? What wastes resources? What are things that are dangerous to practice in the real world? So, by bringing in L&D as well as the business heads from each of the different business units, you do have the opportunity to find a POC or a pilot that actually aligns with those activities, solves a really specific problem within your organization, but might not provide you the most overall footprint. That large scale deployment often already has kind of a legacy answer. So by proving the technology on smaller, high impact opportunities, you have an ability to, demonstrate the same overall capability, but keep it dialed towards something that's scalable and going to be well accepted within your organization. The next pieces are really around content, proprietary versus kind of licensed or general skills content. We often see customers jump immediately to proprietary content. These are things that are really specific to your organization, specific equipment or facilities. But there's also a lot of general skills training that you could potentially use and license off the shelf. For example, forklift training, or, perhaps on the soft skills side with conflict resolution scenarios. So looking at companies like Tailspin or PixoVR, which offer off-the-shelf tools and content authoring experiences, might give you a high-impact POC that demonstrates value proposition within your organization with not such a high investment in overall content production. The next piece is really around distributing VR content at scale. Tethered versus all-in-one? Are these going to be individual devices that are held on to by individuals or groups of people within your organization? Or is there going to be fixed training space that's going to be deployed as well? How are we going to keep these devices clean? How are we going to maintain them? So I think that accessibility and how the training is going to be deployed is actually a really important aspect of, building out an overall scalable scenario for your organization. You should also be talking to IT around things like authentication. They're going to want to know about the devices, how you're going to be authenticating employees to them, and is it going to map to the strategy that they have within the organization. Working with the L&D stakeholder, you can talk about content access, prerequisites, and cadence, understanding how often content should be accessed by users and how often we want them to see particular training modules. Those are all important aspects of deploying these types of things at scale. The last piece is around mobile device management, or MDM, software updates, operating system updates, and security updates, making sure that you kind of cover off all those bases. This is going to be a device within your enterprise, and it's going to need to maintain the same security profile and posture that the rest of the organization has as well. So definitely take a look at a company like Arbor XR, who can provide you some turnkey solutions to some of these problems. The next piece is really around measurement, and that's what we do at Cognitive 3D, right? So data collection, collecting data from the 3D environment, what's going on inside the headset, controllers, additional sensors if needed, taking that data and then putting it to good use, right? So things like integration, connecting that to different systems that might exist within your organization, such as a learning management system or a learning record store, and providing the analysis tools that your organization needs to be able to understand the performance and outcomes of these scenarios within your business. So these are kind of the main three areas that we see around analyzing and measuring VR training and making that data really valuable to your organization. The first thing I want to touch on here is really around the evolution of metrics. In web and mobile, these are very basic metrics. We're talking about, how many page visits did you have, time on page, the real basics of, understanding behavior on a 2D page. When you move to mobile, there's a lot more sensors and capabilities, but really the general idea there is really understanding the funnel. How did somebody tap through a particular environment? How do we optimize towards a particular KPI? When you think about VR and AR, your user is embodied within the environment, right? There's a lot more data, a lot more capability to collect and understand human performance within that environment. We can collect things like head movement, what people are looking at with their eyes, what are they gazing at and fixating on, the 3D position of a user as they move through space, what are they doing with their hands and their fingers. What are the biometrics that we might want to be able to ingest to be able to understand human performance in some of our higher end scenarios? Right? If we think about a VR training proof of concept, stakeholders can often, get away with deploying anecdotal and kind of experiential measures, and these can often be sufficient. So things like, are employees comfortable with using VR? Asking them if they enjoyed the experience, were they engaged in the simulation? You can even qualify these by trying to understand, are they a gamer? Have they used VR before? And these can answer a lot of questions about kind of the basics of, is this going to work for my workforce, and are users going to be comfortable, right? But when we start thinking about kind of more quantitative data on what is possible in a virtual augmented mixed reality environment, it looks something a little bit more like this. This is Scene Explorer, which is a quantitative after-action review. It actually records exactly what the user did, how they behaved in 3D space, how they engaged with their controllers, what did they look at, and how did they perform, right? A tool like this can be very helpful for a trainer to understand what that user did, just like they were in the room in a traditional training use case. So these tools are enabled by these virtual reality devices, which act as a vehicle for data collection in these environments. When you think about these deeper insights and this deeper view into human performance, you can provide a more holistic measure of human behavior, right? So if we look at things like, did employees hesitate before proceeding with a task? And did that cause a higher failure rate within your scenario? There's different learnings that you can apply here around, that particular scenario and how you might train that moving forward. Does high heart rate in high pressure situation affect the competence and compliance with a particular safety scenario? Does it take the user time to notice the hazards? And does that affect the success rate that they have within that scenario as well? So there's a lot of ways to be able to map this quantitative human performance data back to a particular outcome. And designing the outcomes can be really simple. This is an example of one of our tools. This is called the objective system. And with the objective system, you have the capability to set up the sequential or non-sequential behaviors that represent success, completion, compliance within your organization. When you have that flexibility, then you can measure against it in a non-biased way and provide a very standard result for your organization. Once you have that result, then it's more about how do we connect that to the rest of the organization. If your L&D role has deployed a learning management system, tying into that system provides you the maximum overall input into the rest of the organization. Providing that content in a legacy system alongside traditional training methods gives you the ability to tie into your organization's existing learning process and have the highest overall impact as an overall system of education content delivery. When we think about scaling VR training, I don't think that scale is about the number of headsets that you have or even the number of courses that you build. It's really about providing and connecting outcomes for VR training with the rest of your organization. The end goal is to take that VR training content and make it part of your overall learning program within your organization. The real success is being part of your employees' day-to-day learning experience, and we can do that by working with our L&D team and learning management systems as opposed to against them. So being able to present those outcomes and capabilities, the ability to evaluate employee competence and compliance at a very high level with the capabilities that virtual and augmented reality provide, you would have a deeper level of capability, but still be able to integrate with the rest of the organization and the existing systems that you have. When we think about case studies here, there's lots of different ways to deploy these within your organizations, and they can be relatively simple to be able to exercise these. In this case, this is a medium-sized power utility company, and they were interested in developing a proof of concept. They had 3 criteria here. They wanted to understand, did they perform the step? Did they perform the step in the right sequence? And did they complete the step correctly? If we think about that, you can deploy a 3-day training program that actually measures knowledge retention, compliance, and task duration. And in this particular use case, we saw a 59% increase in knowledge retention over the 3-day period from even experienced employees and increased compliance with processes within the organization. Alongside that, you can also demonstrate to your organization that not only can you train and help your employees retain knowledge more effectively, but you can also reduce the amount of time that it took for those employees to execute that with precision. So being able to map those to different KPIs within your organization is really kind of the key to unlocking the value proposition in your organization at scale and using data to your advantage to be able to get that done. Last thing I wanted to mention today is the enterprise guide to scaling VR training. This is a guidebook we put together. It covers most of the topics that we discussed today, but in much more detail. So if you're interested in checking that out, the link is down below here, but you can also just go to cognitive3d.com and there's going to be a link right on the homepage. This free guide will give you a full outlook of all these topics in detail, and hopefully it will help you scale your VR training more effectively within your organization. Thank you for your time today.